And if people are in high risk, they shouldn't be in school. They should be doing things remotely. Just because Donald Trump wants to take a risk with people who go to bars or beaches, those of us who have spent our life teaching kids are not going to take a risk with kids or with our members' lives. Remote and hybrid are really the only two ways you can reopen schools safely.
Randi Weingarten could very well be one of the most powerful political figures in the world. She's the head of the American Federation for Teachers, and she single-handedly led the effort to keep your children home and out of schools all during the pandemic. But today she's singing a different song. She's telling a different story, and a whole lot of people in the mainstream media are going along and just forgetting everything that we went through. Randi Weingarten is pretending that she always wanted schools to be open. She was leading the fight to keep schools open. Well, that's just not true, is it? Joining us right now is Ginny Gentles. Ginny Gentles is the director of the Independent Women's Forum Education Freedom Center. And I don't like to toss these disparaging terms around, Ginny Gentles, but Randi Weingarten's lying, isn't she?
Well, I think I tried to initially describe it as fabrications, but we need to be honest. She's claiming that she wanted schools open. She knew students could not learn online and that she did everything she could to open schools safely. Those are lies. Yeah. She did everything that she could to keep schools closed. And in areas like where I live, they were closed for over a year, and parents remember that.
Yeah, in fact, I vividly remember covering this in the greater Washington area, Northern Virginia, Fairfax County in particular, one of the biggest school districts in the country, when the parents were there at a school board meeting trying to urge the school board to open the schools. The teachers union were protesting out front, and they were carrying little children's coffins in front of the school board meeting. The message was clear. You're going to kill children if you open the schools during COVID-19. Am I misremembering this?
You absolutely aren't. And clearly this was not just a homegrown grassroots local effort, because that happened around the country. There were union organized efforts around the country to send policymakers drafted obituaries of teachers to line up body bags, fake body bags, and gravestones of teachers, and then to, yes, carry around and line up these coffins.
Horrible.
They made it very clear that opening schools would mean that children, but more importantly to them, union members would die, right, and blood would be on the hands of the policymakers.
Right. And let's be clear here, because we know this now. Yes, there are video clips of Randi Weingarten saying, I want to open the schools, but I want to open them safely. Well, what did they mean by safely? Because I saw a lot of demands at the time. I mean, the LA Teachers Union, they were demanding defunding the police before the schools could open safely. So this was a very political conversation the teachers union was engaged in, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Randi Weingarten is a political activist. She cares about her political powers, and she's not the only one when we're talking about unions. The local union leaders in school districts across the country, in California, in Chicago, in New York, and even in districts that we didn't hear about very often throughout all of this, they were being political activists. And when they said safely, they meant pony up a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
We're going to keep schools closed until we get our emergency COVID funding from the federal government. Yeah. And also we have a lot of social justice demands that we want addressed. And that continues to this day. There are teachers on strike in Oakland, California, because they want schools turned into homeless shelters, and they want climate justice days scheduled during the school year.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the virus was never a threat to children, not in any significant way. It wasn't a threat to most of the teachers, certainly with the basic social distancing that's already put into classrooms. That said, even the social distancing and the masking, we've learned that the CDC knew at the time was not actually an effective preventative measure. And the vaccine that they demanded for all the teachers actually didn't prevent anyone from catching the virus. So all of it was for show. The problem here, though, Ginny Gentles, is the children suffered. It was the children who were beholden to these teachers' unions' demands who have suffered, and we've seen now the learning loss writ large, with 8th graders falling behind in literally every subject, reading, math, and history. So should we believe the same people who caused this problem when they say they're the ones who will fix it now, or is it time for a third way?
Well, Randi Weingarten recently testified before Congress and showed absolutely no remorse or responsibility for this learning loss crisis. She did indicate that students are suffering, and she said that what would be important is to have community schools, which basically means services and healthcare and all kinds of things that have absolutely nothing to do with school's primary mission, which is educating children. She
Right.
made no acknowledgement of these horrible learning loss and dips in scores that were already bad going into the pandemic.
Yeah.
Things were not in good shape.
Is it my imagination, or does the teachers union spend a whole lot of time trying to keep their teachers from actually going to work every day? I'm now seeing this story that 850 school districts are adopting 4-day school weeks. And again, this is at the direction of and encouragement of the teachers union. But there's a huge learning loss happening right now in our schools, and studies show that the 4-day school week, does that improve matters at all?
It's very clear that the 4-day school week harms children, and there are multiple studies that were released and reported on just this week indicating that this has to stop. It's a social contagion among policymakers. Let's switch the school day down to 4 days. This contagion must stop. This policy must stop. It harms students academically. The studies are proving that. And it doesn't actually help teachers as far as retaining teachers, which was why the policy was introduced in the first place. So there's absolutely no reason to introduce a policy that's going to get us even further behind. And we're not just further behind where we were before COVID hit, we're further behind other countries, which of course had their schools open during the COVID pandemic, and of course are not introducing 4-day school days or shortened Wednesdays or Fridays, which is another social contagion happening around school districts.
Yeah, I assure you, in China or in Germany or in Singapore, where they're raising the children who will compete against our kids in the global economy, they're not trying to figure out how to keep kids home more days from school. Quite the opposite. I'd love to ask you specifically about how things are going with the school choice initiative, because it seems like we're beating our head against the wall trying to get these school districts to change their policies and to wean themselves off of the crack that is funding that they get, the money and support they get from the teachers union. The solution is school choice. How are things going at the state level right now with those initiatives?
Well, there's the good news, Larry, and I'm happy to bring that good news to you because it has been bleak for parents, for students, but also for educators for the last 3 years. And school choice helps those students escape the failing public schools, but it also helps the educators escape the public schools. And we're seeing expansion of school choice policies. There are 6 states who have already significantly expanded school choice this year: Iowa, Utah, Arkansas, Florida, and now Indiana and South Carolina have expanded school choice, most of those states to near universal options. They'll be rolling out over the next few years. Smaller numbers of students are eligible in the early years of the program, but we're going to see a gradual shift of freedom and opportunity, both for students and educators, to do something different, to leave that failed system, to go to a private school or a micro school. And parents will now have the ability to use their education savings accounts, ESAs, that are being introduced in these states, to even use those for homeschooling.
Yeah, and one other aspect of this, the initiatives to keep kids home from school during the pandemic, or the 4-day school week and everything, people seem to forget mom and dad in this whole equation. You know, because of the state of the economy and the state of inflation, oftentimes both parents have to work to be able to pay for just the basics in a home. If the kids stay home 4 days or an extra day a week, who's supposed to shoulder that burden? That means one of the parents has to stay home. Is that even part of the conversation?
Well, one of the parents has to stay home, or the parent can drop their child off at the school and pay for daycare. So what this ends up doing is increasing the financial burden to families. Sure, you can send your child to the free public school, but it's only free 4 days. You have to pay for that 5th day.
Wow, that's quite a racket. Thankfully, because of your efforts over there at the Education Freedom Center Independent Women's Forum, there is definitely some movement on this topic, and we appreciate your activism on it. Thank you, Ginny Gentles.
Thanks, Larry.
There's more to come. Keep it here. It's O'Connor Tonight on Salem News Channel.